My landlord did work on the roof, and they got rid of my other chimney. I don't really know why. I mean, it wasn't connected to anything, so I guess that makes sense, but I don't know why they left this one. But this is the new chimney now. So, Jimmy Neutron Had a Dog, So Why Can't I Have a Friend is a song all about navigating friendships, and specifically failed friendships and falling outs that you've had. It's one of the goofier song titles that Hot Mulligan has, but also they have all of this shit as song titles, so maybe it's not that bad. And I gotta say, I never thought that much about this song until I went to make this video. And I know I say things all the time like they convey such a universal experience or it's such an inherently human emotion, but I think for the section of Hot Mulligan fans that know and listen to this song, it really means a lot to them. And I say that because before every video I make a Reddit post on the Hot Mulligan subreddit just asking what people think about the song and any trivia they know and stuff, just to help with research. And I got by far the most responses I've ever gotten on this one. And I'll show them, but I won't go through them all because, it would take a lot of time. But you can see a lot of people responded, and a lot of the responses are pretty long. They all discuss how it reminds them of times they've had failed friendships and times where they've been the victim or times where they've been the problem. The song is sort of like a rally cry and not necessarily one of pride. For a lot of people, including myself, this song is a reminder of your own faults and how your own faults can lead to hurting people that you care about or who care about you. But to identify with a song, you don't have to celebrate it. Art can make you feel shitty just as much as it can make you feel joy, and sometimes, like in this case, I think it does both.
The bill can't be too much, the truth is that I can't spend a life. Fix my social distrust with something pumping gas instead of blood.
So like I said, I think this song is about failed friendships. And the singer talks about this deep-rooted social distrust that he has from him being burned time and time again in friendships. But instead of healthily addressing it, he says he fixes it with something pumping gas instead of blood. I read that line as living extravagantly to try to cover your own insecurities and self-doubts. Going around buying expensive cars and watches and Bugattis and whatever else, all to try to cover up that pit of sadness you have at the center. The singer says something pumping gas instead of blood, which I think is pretty clearly referring to, a human heart. The idea is that he knows that the way he should address this social distrust and these feelings is with a real human being, with either himself being introspective or with other people talking through things with them. But instead he says he can't spend enough and the bill can't be too much. He keeps trying to find other things to give him that closure and that happiness, but he knows that this road he's running down doesn't end. But it doesn't matter that he knows, because the alternative is facing himself or other people in the eyes.
Hours are nothing to a time, it's on something. Agree with me, please don't act like I'm shunning connections and friends for simple synapses. Love doesn't work and you're proof of it happening.
Now, in this section, I think he's talking to the people around him, to the friend or maybe the friends that he is currently having a falling out with. He doesn't want to face the messy reality of human relationships, so he just begs them to agree with him, please. Nothing about his whole escapism tactic is subtle, right? He knows that it's a farce. They know that it's a farce, and I think more importantly, they know that he knows. But he still begs them to ignore it. He says, don't act like I'm shunning connections and friends for simple synapses. Those temporary synapses that fire off in his brain and give him that hit of dopamine when he drives around in an expensive car or gets hammered are nothing. It's just this conveyor belt that he has to always keep spinning, because if it stops, he's gonna have to face himself in the mirror. I think it's a very common dynamic in a lot of friendships where he and maybe even the other people involved won't acknowledge that there's this social hole being dug. The longer this problem lingers and he won't acknowledge it, and they know he won't acknowledge it, the more resentment builds and the less goodwill is there, and the harder it will be to ever get out of the hole. And then at the end, he defiantly claims, love doesn't work and you're proof of that happening. And I think this is my favorite line in the whole song, because even without hearing the rest of the song, it can be interpreted in a couple different ways. Maybe the you he's talking to here is his friend or his friends. The experiences he's had with them and the fights they've had and the emotional damage done is enough to him to prove that this will never work and that love won't work. They have been more than enough proof to him that it's just not worth it. But I think the you could also be directed at us, the audience. Maybe he's saying that we, by listening to and enjoying and relating to his music, are all the proof he needs that love won't work. In a weird kind of way, by getting such a following, we're kind of vindicating his belief that friendships and human connections are doomed to fail. Because that means it's not just him, it's not just his one-off shitty situation, but it's that everyone around him feels the same way. Friendships and the world around him being so irredeemable and doomed to fail isn't just a coincidence, it's a natural part of the human experience. And finally, maybe the you he's blaming is himself. He's had bad friendship after bad friendship, and each time things fall apart and he thinks he'll find better friends and he'll learn his lesson and he'll act better, but each time it falls apart again. Maybe the common link through all of it is him. Maybe his faults and his weakness and his selfishness is what causes all the problems, even though countless people have tried to be his friend and to love him. Because despite all the people who have tried to get close to him, he's still sitting here defiantly saying love doesn't work. Maybe it just doesn't work on him. Maybe he's unfixable. And now we hit the main chorus, and I'm finally able to talk about what I think is the kind of overarching metaphorical premise of this whole song. So continuing the narrative from the first couple verses, he says, now that we're unable to pretend that we are stable. Now that this problem, this social hole has gotten so deep between them that they can't just go on pretending like things are okay, he has to figure out something else to do. So he moves on again, but instead of going off to find new friends and repeat the cycle, he decides that he's going to build a better friend from the scraps that he finds in his basement. Hence the over-the-top imagery of Jimmy Neutron literally, like building a better friend out of a box of scraps in his basement. Hot mulligan.
I was able to build this in a cave! With a box of scraps!
Symbolically, I think the whole idea of building this perfect friend for himself out of scraps is kind of like him picking and choosing just the parts that he wants from other people that he's been friends with in his life. And so, I imagine him literally in, the fucking Baldur's Gate 3 character creator, selecting all the right options and tuning them just this way and that. Making them funny enough that he enjoys being with them, but he's not self-conscious. Just attractive enough that they're nice to look at, but that things aren't going to get weird and he's not going to get interested in them. With all this right conflict-resolving tendencies to never push him out of his comfort zone and to never actually challenge him on his faults. And yeah, the idea of him building this robot friend Frankenstein thing is goofy, but it's such an inherently inhuman concept. As people, we're messy and we're complicated and we're contradictory. Trying to build a sanitized, perfect person is no longer inhuman. It's not really a friend anymore. I think, at least to me, friendship is about comparing and contrasting your human experience with another person. It's about compromise and understanding and relation to someone. And in a healthy friendship, what can happen is a sum greater than its parts. And so he uses this fantastical premise of literally building a robot in his basement out of all the parts of old people because he can't handle the gray areas and the conflict that come with real human friends. It's like the title alludes to. For those uneducated mongrels out there, Jimmy Neutron is a show about a boy genius who literally has a lab in his basement, and he builds the perfect robot dog named Goddard, who can do everything he wants. He can obey commands, and he has rockets in his feet that let him fly around, and he can eat aluminum like any self-respecting dog should be able to do. And if we look back at the previous verses that we already went over with this idea of he's literally building a robot, it adds a lot to them. The thing pumping gas instead of blood isn't a car or a boat, it's literally this automata he's made. There was a line that I skipped over before, hours are nothing to automata something, that I think now with this context is kind of like saying, real people have their own problems and they don't always have time for me, but a robot whose sole purpose is to appease me will never not have time for me. It's honestly a pretty selfish way to look at what a friend should be. And then that last line that I mentioned I really like, love doesn't work and you're proof of that happening. Maybe what he's actually talking about is the robot. You, this perfect friend that I'm building. I was only forced to make you because real human friendships, real human connections never work. They just lead to heartbreak in this endless cycle. You're all the proof that I need. At least maybe that's how he would justify it in his head.
It's beginning to talk and it said that I need trying hard. I should just give a heart. Then it left with most my stuff. Prophets all said, fail first, try again. Just like you said. The first time to fuck up, but always a try again.
So, given the whole premise we just set up, I think this section is about the robot being completed and turning on. He says it's beginning to talk, so it's come alive, and instead of giving him the appeasement and the comfort that he built it for, it immediately says he didn't try enough, that he should just give up, and then it left with most his stuff. Which, I know this song is like sad and the whole premise is very introspective, but just the image of like Chris or Tades building this robot Frankenstein thing, and then the first thing that it does is talk shit, take his stuff, and leave, is kind of funny. But to me, this section verifies that the problem lies with him, not with the people around him. The robot is obviously symbolic for what he wants out of a perfect friend. It's something that's built to always agree with him and never push him and never leave him. So the fact that the very first thing this imaginary perfect friend does is tell him he wasn't enough and leave him is more or less him telling himself that that's what he thinks. He doesn't just fear that he's the big problem in his life. He believes that he's the big problem in his life. It's just like every other song that we've gone over on this channel so far, where the content and the situation that the song is built around might be complicated and multifaceted, but when we walk along the singer's train of thought with them, we always end up at the same kind of a conclusion. The girl he's fallen for isn't just tired or unsure of how she feels. She hates him. His partner and him only grew apart because he wasn't good enough for her when they were together. His disappointing childhood wasn't due to anyone he was raised with, but it was due to the fact that he doesn't deserve a happy childhood. His social anxiety isn't normal. Everybody else seems to have figured it out. The reason he never found the love he wanted was that he was too much of a coward to act. Different stories, different situations, different emotions, but they all circle back to the same idea that he's the fuck up. Hot Mulligan handle any situation without blaming it entirely on yourself challenge 2024. Impossible gone sexual.
If this is what you call human, this is what I call desperate. If this is what you call human, this is what I call desperate. If this is what you call human, well, this is what I call desperate. If this is what you call human, well, this is what I call desperate.
I read this whole refrain as the singer sort of arguing back against that idea that that's just the way life goes. When you get dealt shit hand after shit hand, I think it's a common coping mechanism to say things like, you can't win them all, or you gotta take the highs with the lows. But at a certain point, after failing over and over, it's inevitable that you come to the conclusion that that mentality is bullshit and everything is just fucked. So the repetition, this is what you call human, this is what I call desperate, to me kind of reads as like, you can say that everybody has their rough days, but when I have nothing but rough days, maybe I'm just not like other humans. Maybe I'm just a sad, desperate fuck up.
You gave me all these blistered fingers over metal shards and oiled fixtures. Fuck you and fuck me even harder. Tell me why I even bother. You gave me all these blistered fingers over metal shards and oiled fixtures. Fuck you and fuck me even harder. Tell me why I even bother.
And then this last verse, I think, is the singer more or less giving up on friendships and relationships. He's still running with the whole robot metaphor, talking about the emotional scars and that deep-rooted social distrust he mentioned as cuts that he's gotten from the shards of metal building the robot and blisters that have come from hot oil running over the machine. He's at his limit and he finally tells this other person, fuck you, I'm done trying to open myself up. And this song can be about, maybe just a platonic friend or a romantic relationship. Because I think the line, fuck you and fuck me even or harder, obviously has some sexual connotation to it, like, sort of an unhealthy, like, hate fucking type of situation thing. But alternatively, I think the line also doubles down on the idea that he blames himself for all the falling out. Like, sure, fuck you for what you did, but at the end of the day, fuck me even harder. Because I know I'm the reason you did what you did, and I've done much worse. Isn't that a fun little interpretation of a goofy little song about a boy genius and his robot dog's wacky adventures? Genuinely though, I know I leaned a little harder than normal into the kind of nihilistic sadness that this song is about, but I did that for a reason. Like I said at the beginning, art doesn't have to be celebratory to be beautiful, and it doesn't have to be uplifting to be impactful in a positive way. I think this song hits so many people so deeply because it lets them feel their self-hatred and their anxieties without pulling any punches, and it lets them know that other people feel the same way. I mentioned earlier that the artist may have been referring to the audience when he said, "Love doesn't work and you're proof of that happening." He looks at the fact that other people feel the same way that he does as proof that friendships and human connection will always lead to heartbreak. But I think it can be seen another way too. The fact that so many people can and do relate to his music isn't proof that he or any of the listeners are desperate, like he concludes. Rather, it proves that the complicated shit of life is a natural part of the human experience, and these gray areas and these questions and these conflicts don't always have easy solutions. It's common to feel really, really low lows and really, really high highs in your life, and knowing that other people feel that way isn't just comforting, it's human. An emotional outlet is an incredibly valuable thing, and Hot Mulligan offers that to people with this song. And I think that's why, for those who listen to it, it means so much. Sadly, though, the song didn't reference the time that Goddard pulled a piano out of his ass and then played it, so 3 out of 10 bad song.
Shoplift from Target every time you go.